In the palace of King David lived Tamar, a young princess of Israel known for her great beauty and pure heart. She was the daughter of the powerful king, and her presence filled the court with kindness and grace, earning the respect and admiration of everyone around her. But behind the brightness and honor that surrounded her, Tamar would face a tragedy that would change her life forever. Her story is one of the most moving and painful in the Bible, as her trust in her own family was shattered in a devastating way. It was her own brother who caused the pain that would shake not only Tamar's life, but the entire house of David, bringing sorrow, conflict, and a desire for vengeance that would echo for many years. In this video, we will understand what led to Tamar's suffering, the motives behind her brother's cruel act, and how this injustice set off a series of events that would divide the royal family. Stay until the end to learn this impactful story and the hard lessons it teaches about betrayal and the consequences of vengeance. Prepare yourself for a story that will deeply touch your heart. Tamar lived peacefully and safely in the palace, surrounded by her family's love. Her father, King David, was a strong leader respected by everyone in Israel. He loved Tamar and trusted her, admiring her values, which reflected everything he believed in. Tamar was an obedient and dedicated daughter, respecting her family and living with sincere faith, which made her even more special to those around her. For the people of Israel, Tamar was an inspiration. She was a princess, but what truly moved people was her character and integrity. Everyone saw her as a treasure, someone who lived according to her faith, always keeping a pure heart. Those who knew Tamar admired her gentleness. She was discreet and reserved, qualities rare for someone surrounded by the power of royalty. Despite all the court intrigues, Tamar remained true to herself, maintaining her dignity and purity, which showed just how much her father, King David, trusted her. The palace was her home, and Tamar was loved by her father and respected by all who knew her name. She had no enemies and lived with innocence, unaware of the challenges that were to come, which would shake her life and the peace of her family. Amnon, King David's eldest son and heir to the throne, was known for his strong temper, but over time he began to be consumed by a dark and dangerous feeling, an obsession with Tamar, his half-sister. At first it was just a thought, but gradually this desire grew until it took over his mind and heart. Tamar's presence disturbed him, and the more he saw or thought about her, the stronger this desire became, until it turned into a constant anguish. The Bible describes this inner conflict in 2 Samuel 13 verse 2. Amnon became so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became ill. He knew that his desire was wrong, something that went against God's commandments. This understanding only increased his suffering, but he couldn't push away these thoughts, which turned into an obsession. As time went by, Amnon began to lose his peace. His face showed signs of weariness. He lost his appetite, and those around him noticed he was changing, but no one knew why. It seemed like an invisible illness consuming him, fed by the dark thoughts he allowed. Meanwhile, Tamar, without any fault, had no idea what was going on in her half-brother's heart. Amnon was conflicted. He knew his desire for Tamar was wrong and disrespectful to his family and to God. Yet he let this feeling grow and take over his mind, which only increased his anguish and weakened him each day. Seeing Amnon suffering, his cousin Jonadab realized something was wrong and decided to investigate. Jonadab, known for his cleverness and ability to take advantage of situations, approached Amnon and asked curiously, "Why do you, the king's son, look so thin and sad?" 2 Samuel 13 verse 4. He wanted to understand the reason for Amnon's sadness, as Amnon, being the king's son, was surrounded by privileges. After hesitating, Amnon revealed his darkest secret. He was obsessed with Tamar, his half-sister. Instead of being shocked or reprimanding him, Jonadab saw this as an opportunity to show his skill in solving problems, even though he knew it was completely wrong and dangerous. He didn't consider the consequences or the suffering it might cause, focusing only on manipulating the situation. Jonadab then suggested a devious and cruel plan. "Pretend you are ill," he said to Amnon. "When your father comes to visit you, ask him to have Tamar come and prepare food for you." The idea was for Amnon to pretend to be very sick, appearing weak and in need of special care. This way, he could ask Tamar to come and take care of him and prepare food for him. Jonadab believed that once they were alone, Tamar wouldn't realize she was walking into a trap. This plan from Jonadab shows how a bad influence can be dangerous. Instead of advising Amnon to handle his feelings in a healthy way and resist this temptation, Jonadab encouraged him to follow a wrong path. He didn't think about the consequences or the pain it would bring to Tamar and the family. His focus was only on helping Amnon satisfy his desire, regardless of the cost. Driven by his obsession, Amnon accepted Jonadab's plan immediately. He was willing to deceive his own father, King David, and betray Tamar's trust to get what he wanted. Tamar, with her kind and innocent heart, had no idea of what was coming. When she received her father's request to go to Amnon's room and help him, she went without thinking twice. Known for her kindness, Tamar accepted the request to care for her half-brother, believing she could ease his suffering. When Tamar entered Amnon's room, she found him lying down and apparently weak, and she quickly moved to help him. She prepared the dough with her own hands and baked cakes right there, thinking it would make him feel better just as he had asked. With all her compassion, Tamar was focused on taking care of Amnon, without suspecting his intentions. Once the food was ready, Tamar brought the cakes to him. However, instead of eating, Amnon asked everyone to leave the room, leaving them alone. This request might have made Tamar suspicious, but in her innocence, she suspected nothing, and simply waited for him to accept the food she had prepared with such care. Amnon then asked Tamar to come closer and feed him with her own hands, which made her feel even more at ease. Suddenly, Amnon's attitude changed. The weakness he had shown disappeared, and he looked at Tamar with a cold and ruthless expression. At that moment, Tamar realized the danger, but it was already too late. Amnon grabbed her forcefully, and Tamar tried to resist, begging him not to commit such a terrible injustice. "No, my brother," she cried, "do not force me, for this should not be done in Israel. Do not commit this foolishness." 2 Samuel 13, verse 12. With a trembling voice, she desperately pleaded, hoping that Amnon would understand the gravity of what he was about to do, knowing it would be a great disgrace, something shameful before God and all the people of Israel. Tamar continued begging Amnon, trying to make him understand that such an act would ruin her life and stain both their reputations. In a final attempt to prevent this tragedy, she even suggested that if he truly desired her, he could ask King David, her father, to allow them to marry. But Amnon, completely overtaken by his desire, ignored Tamar's every word and plea. He no longer saw her as a sister, nor as someone of value. In that moment, his selfishness and cruelty had taken over. Tragically, Amnon forced Tamar, violating her dignity and her trust. This cruel act was one of the saddest moments in the Bible, leaving a deep scar on Tamar's life. She had entered Amnon's room with kindness and sisterly love, but left betrayed, dishonored, and with a pain she would carry forever. Shortly after committing this terrible act, something unexpected happened to Amnon. The obsessive desire he felt for Tamar quickly turned into contempt. What had once been a sick passion became repulsion, and he could no longer bear her presence. The Bible describes this change in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 15. Then Amnon felt a great aversion for her, and his aversion was greater than the love with which he had loved her. With a cold look and harsh words, Amnon ordered Tamar to leave his room. Amnon showed no concern for Tamar's state or the suffering he had caused. Still in shock, Tamar refused to leave. She knew that being cast out at that moment would be an even greater humiliation than all she had already endured. With a trembling voice filled with pain, she said, "There is no reason for you to send me away. Expelling me now would be an even greater evil than what you have already done." 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 16. Tamar hoped Amnon would show at least a little compassion, but he remained indifferent. Then, in an even crueler act, Amnon called a servant and ordered, "Take this woman out and lock the door behind her." Hearing this, Tamar felt the weight of rejection and scorn. She had entered the room as a respected princess, and now she was expelled as if she had no worth. The door closing behind her symbolized the end of her dignity. With a broken heart, Tamar left. In a gesture of deep sorrow, she tore her princess clothes, a special tunic that represented her purity and position, and covered her head with ashes as a sign of mourning and despair. To Tamar, that tunic no longer represented who she was, for her honor and peace had been brutally taken away. As she walked through the palace, Tamar felt everyone's eyes on her. Her sadness and humiliation were clear, and those who saw her understood that something terrible had happened. The heavy silence around her spoke louder than any words. Each step Tamar took was marked by pain and a sense of abandonment. She didn't know where to go or how to start over. Before, she was a young woman admired and respected, but now she carried a deep pain, not only from the violence she suffered, but also from the scorn with which she was treated. With no hope, Tamar sought refuge in the house of her brother Absalom, the only place where she believed she could find comfort. As she entered Absalom's house, her sorrow was visible. Her face showed suffering, her clothes were torn, and her head covered in ashes was a sign of mourning. She could barely speak, but her look told everything that had happened. When Absalom saw his sister's condition, he felt a mixture of pain and anger. He had always been the protective brother, the strong figure by Tamar's side. When he understood what Amnon had done, his face hardened and a deep anger arose in his heart. "Did Amnon, your brother, do this to you?" he asked, seeking to confirm what he already feared. He knew Amnon's character and understood that what he had done was unforgivable. Still, Absalom said to Tamar, "Now, my sister, be silent. He is your brother. Do not be distressed by this." He didn't mean he was ignoring Tamar's suffering or forgiving Amnon. Instead, Absalom was trying to calm Tamar, assuring her that she would have his protection and would be safe by his side. Absalom welcomed Tamar into his home, but inside, his anger grew each day. The resentment he felt turned into a strong desire for revenge against Amnon. Tamar was very dear to him, and seeing her in that state broke his heart. Absalom knew her life would never be the same, and that the family's honor had been stained. For him, what Amnon did was unforgivable. He said nothing, but inside, he was planning a way to bring justice for his sister. Over time, Tamar's pain didn't lessen, and the tension between the brothers only increased. Absalom became more distant, lost in thoughts of revenge. The house, once full of life, was now marked by mourning and sadness. The relationship between Absalom and Amnon, which was already complicated, was now completely destroyed, as Absalom could not forgive what his brother had done. Even under Absalom's care, Tamar felt alone and abandoned. She carried a pain that seemed impossible to erase and a shame that was hard to hide. The injustice she suffered had taken away her peace, and every time she looked at Absalom, she saw that her brother was full of anger. Absalom was no longer just her protector, but someone determined to seek revenge, willing to do anything to provide some form of reparation for her lost honor. Absalom's anger was like a flame that burned silently, but never faded. He didn't openly show his intention to avenge Tamar, but he knew he wouldn't let what happened go unpunished. He understood that confronting Amnon immediately would be risky and might even cost his own life or bring trouble with his father, King David. So, Absalom decided to wait, allowing time to pass while he secretly planned his revenge. For 2 long years, Absalom remained calm on the outside, hiding his anger. He waited patiently, planning the right moment to act, showing how cold and determined he was. He lived alongside the brother he hated, appearing tranquil, but inside, his desire to bring justice for Tamar grew each day. Absalom knew he needed an opportunity to act without raising suspicion. Finally, this chance arose when he organized a sheep-shearing festival, a traditional celebration in Israel. Absalom invited all the king's sons, including Amnon, and arranged a great feast filled with food and joy so that no one would suspect his plan. He went to King David and requested permission to hold the feast, and with his father's approval, everything was ready for the moment of vengeance. Absalom told his servants, "When Amnon is merry with wine, I will give the order for you to kill him. Do not be afraid, for I am the one giving the command. Be strong and courageous," 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 28, making it clear that the time had come. During the feast, when the wine had made everyone merry, Absalom gave the order, and his servants attacked Amnon, taking his life. The plan he had prepared was fulfilled, and Absalom avenged his sister Tamar, but at a high cost that would bring even more suffering and division to David's family. The news of Amnon's death soon reached King David, who was devastated, feeling the pain of losing 2 sons, one to death and the other to rebellion. Absalom, knowing he would now be pursued, fled to Geshur, where he lived in exile for 3 years, far from his family and homeland. Amnon's sin, the injustice against Tamar, and Absalom's revenge caused an irreparable rift in the royal family. This sad story shows us how violence and vengeance can create a cycle of destruction. Amnon's wrongdoing brought suffering to Tamar, which stirred Absalom's anger, leading to even more pain. David's family was marked by disorder, showing how injustice and sin can destroy even the strongest bonds. This outcome reminds us that the path of vengeance rarely brings true peace. Instead, it increases pain, causes more suffering, and divides people. The story of Absalom and Tamar is a deep lesson about the consequences of sin and violence, emphasizing that forgiveness and justice are the only ways to restore what was lost. Leave a comment if you already knew the story of Tamar, the daughter of King David. Give a like and share this video with more people. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow future videos. May God bless you.